Imagine waking up to find your teenage son is literally fading away. His skin is turning a sickly, bruised gray, and the best doctors in the country have no idea why. Then, at 3:15 a.m., you see why. You catch a glimpse of a woman crouched at the foot of his bed, gaunt, impossibly pale, with an unhinged jaw and a tongue that slithers over his skin like a parasite. You realize she's not just haunting him, she's drinking him dry. And the most terrifying part? You can't scream and you can't run. You have to stay perfectly still and watch her feed, or your son dies. This is the story of a prominent family in 1975 who learned the hard way that in the deep jungles of India, some things are better left undisturbed. The year was 1975. The setting was a dense, humid village called Gathal, located in the Medinapur district of West Bengal, India. This is a region defined by its thick, sprawling jungles, winding rivers, and centuries of deep-rooted folklore. But inside the two-story home of the Roy family, folklore was nothing more than fairy tales for the uneducated. Dr. Roy and his wife were both highly respected physicians. They were wealthy, highly rational, and firmly rooted in science. They believed in medicine, biology, and things that could be proven under a microscope. They had absolute zero belief in the paranormal, demons, curses, or spirits. They had one child, a 17-year-old boy named Rohan. Because both parents were constantly working long, exhausting shifts at the local hospital, Rohan was left to his own devices. And to compensate for their absence, they gave him an absolute fortune in pocket money. Naturally, Rohan became the king of his high school. He bunked classes, funded elaborate hangouts for his friends, and basically bought the loyalty of everyone around him. While his parents thought he was safely asleep in his ground-floor bedroom, Rohan was regularly sneaking out through his window into the dead of night, wandering the local jungles with his friends, smoking, drinking, and doing whatever he pleased.
For a while, life was a careless party, but then the party abruptly stopped. One morning, Rohan didn't wake up for breakfast. When his mother checked on him, he was burning up with a massive fever. At first, the doctors assumed it was just a severe jungle infection, maybe malaria or dengue, but as the days bled into weeks, it became violently clear that this was no ordinary illness. None of the antibiotics worked. Rohan's health didn't just decline, it plummeted. He began losing massive amounts of weight, his ribs pushing sharply against his skin. The color completely drained from his body, replaced by a sickly, dark, ashen hue. Deep, bruised rings formed around his sunken eyes. During the day, he could barely sit up to eat, but by nightfall, a strange paralytic exhaustion would overtake him. He became entirely bedridden, slipping into a catatonic state every time the sun went down. Dr. Roy and his wife were terrified. Over the course of 3 months, they spent the modern equivalent of $50,000 bringing in top medical specialists from the city. They changed his medication weekly. They ran every test imaginable, but the diagnosis remained a horrifying mystery. It was as if the boy's body had completely stopped producing blood. He was slowly, methodically being drained to death, and science had no answers. Word of the doctor's dying son spread through the village. Eventually, an elderly family friend, a man they affectionately called Dadaji, came to visit. When Dadaji walked into Rohan's room and saw the skeletal, blackened figure of the boy he once knew, the blood drained from his face. He pulled Dr. Roy out into the hallway and whispered, "You are looking at this through the eyes of a hospital. You're treating a disease, but this is not a disease. Look at him. Something is feeding on your son." Dr. Roy wanted to brush it off as superstitious nonsense, but as a father watching his only child waste away, desperation outweighed logic. He agreed to let Dadaji take him to see a local mystic, a tantric, who lived about 5 miles away, deep in the woods. When they arrived at the tantric's secluded hut, the old mystic didn't offer comfort. He took one look at Dr. Roy and let out a dark, humorless laugh. "You come to me now," the tantric scoffed, "when the grip of death is already around his throat? You are too late. The boy has maybe 10, 15 days left." Dr. Roy fell to his knees, begging the man to explain what was happening, offering him any amount of money he wanted. The tantric shook his head. "You don't even know what happens in your own house. Every night between 3 a.m. and 3:15 a.m., your home is visited by a Carna Pishachini." In ancient Indian folklore, a Carna Pishachini is a deeply malevolent demonic entity. She is often described as a dark, witch-like spirit that latches on to a human victim. She doesn't kill them right away. Instead, she slowly siphons their life force, feeding on their blood night after night until there is nothing left but a husk. "She enters his room," the tantric continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She sits at the foot of his bed and she drinks his blood. That is why your medicine fails." Dr. Roy was stunned, but his deeply ingrained skepticism fought back. "We've slept in the room next to him. We've never seen or heard anything." The tantric's eyes flared with anger. "Do not question me. If you want proof, take this." He reached into a woven basket and handed Dr. Roy a large spool of thick, sacred red thread. Then he handed him a sharp metal fishhook. "Tonight," the mystic instructed, "sleep in his room. Keep your eyes open. When she arrives, do not speak. Do not react. Simply take this hook, attach it to whatever tattered rags she is wearing, and tie the other end to your bedpost. When she leaves, she will take the thread with her, and we will finally know which tree she calls home." That night, the atmosphere in the Roy household was suffocating. Dr. Roy and his wife moved Rohan into their bedroom. They locked the doors, turned off the lights, and lay in the dark pretending to sleep. Rohan was completely incapacitated, locked in that unnatural coma-like slumber. Midnight passed, then 1 a.m., 2 a.m. As the clock struck 3 a.m., the house was dead silent. Only the sound of the jungle insects buzzed outside. Dr. Roy lay gripping the fishhook, his heart hammering against his ribs. 10 minutes passed, nothing. Dr. Roy slowly began to exhale, anger bubbling up inside him. He had been a fool. The tantric was a con artist, and he was wasting precious time. But at exactly 3:15 a.m., the ambient noise of the jungle outside abruptly stopped. The air in the bedroom went ice cold, a sickening metallic stench like rusted copper and rotting meat wafted into the room. Dr. Roy kept his eyes reduced to tiny slits, his breath caught in his throat. Through the open window, a grotesque, twisted silhouette silently contorted itself and slid into the bedroom. It was a woman. Her hair was a tangled, wild mess, and her skin was ghastly pale. But the true horror was her face. Her jaw unhinged with a soft popping sound, and an impossibly long, dark tongue slithered out of her mouth. She leaned over Rohan's exposed feet and began to drag her tongue at his soles. Immediately, Rohan let out a low, agonizing groan. He was completely unconscious, but the pain was registering deep within his nervous system. Every scientific instinct in Dr. Roy's brain shattered in an instant. He was staring at a literal demon. His primal instinct screamed at him to jump up, grab a weapon, and attack the monster. But the tantric's warning echoed in his mind. "She does not care about you. She only wants the boy. Do not alert her." Trembling violently, Dr. Roy slowly reached out his hand in the pitch-black room. He inched the metal fishhook toward the entity, With one swift, terrifyingly quiet motion, he snagged the hook onto the trailing fabric of the demon's garments. He immediately pulled his hand back and squeezed his eyes shut. For 5 agonizing minutes, the sickening sound of the creature feeding filled the room. Then, exactly at 3:20 a.m., the entity stood up. She slid back out the window and disappeared into the night. As she moved, the spool of red thread spun wildly, unraveling into the dark. The next morning, the tantric arrived at the house. He looked at the nearly empty spool of thread, and instead of looking triumphant, his face drained of color. "She drank too much," he said grimly, looking at Rohan's lifeless form. And worse, when she reached her lair, she realized the sacred thread was attached to her. She cannot touch it, but she knows we are hunting her. If we do not sever this curse tonight, your son will not see the sunrise. The tantric explained that they had to perform an aggressive, ancient banishing ritual, and it couldn't be done in the safety of their home. It had to be done at the shmashan, the traditional Indian open-air cremation ground, a place heavily associated with dark spirits, ash, and death. At midnight, Dr. Roy, his wife, and the tantric carried the dying boy into the heart of the cremation grounds. The air was thick with the smell of charred wood and old ash. The tantric set up a ritual circle, lighting fires and preparing a sacrificial black chicken. But then, the tantric turned to Dr. Roy and gave him a suicidal task. "I have to stay here and keep the boy's soul tethered to his body," the mystic said, "but you must walk back to your house alone. Take the spool, follow the thread into the jungle. It will lead you to her tree. When you find the branch the thread is tied to, you must snap it off and bring it back to this fire." Dr. Roy's blood ran cold. He would have to walk blindly into the demon's lair. "But heed my warning," the tantric locked eyes with the terrified doctor. "When you take her branch, she will be furious. As you walk back here, you will hear things. But no matter what you hear, no matter who calls your name, do not look behind you. If you turn around, you accept her invitation. She will take you, and your son will die." Armed with nothing but pure adrenaline and a father's love, Dr. Roy left the cremation grounds. He walked the mile back to his empty house. He grabbed the thread hanging from his bedpost and followed it out the window, stepping into the dense, pitch-black jungle. The thread snaked through the thick brush for a long time before finally pulling taut against the trunk of a massive, ancient peepal tree. In Indian folklore, peepal trees are notoriously known as the dwelling places of powerful spirits. Dr. Roy swallowed his terror. He climbed the rough bark, tracing the thread up into the canopy. He found the branch where the hook was embedded. Wrapping his hands around the thick wood, he pulled back with all his might and snapped the branch in half. The moment the wood cracked, a warm, thick liquid gushed over Dr. Roy's hands. In the pale moonlight, he realized it wasn't sap. It was a torrential river of blood, all the blood the entity had stolen from his son. It poured from the severed branch, soaking into the soil below. Clutching the bleeding wood, Dr. Roy dropped to the ground and began the long walk back to the shmashan. For the first few minutes, there was only the sound of his own heavy breathing, but then the psychological warfare began. "Help! Please help me!" It was his wife's voice. It sounded like she was being dragged into the bushes just 10 feet behind him. Dr. Roy froze. His heart hammered in his chest, but he remembered the tantric's warning. He forced his legs to move forward. A moment later, he heard the tantric's voice directly over his shoulder. "Stop! You did it wrong! Turn around, quickly!" Dr. Roy squeezed his eyes shut, gripping the branch tighter. he kept walking. Then, he heard the one thing that nearly broke him. A weak, trembling voice crying out, "Papa, Papa, it hurts. Please look at me." It was Rohan. Tears streamed down Dr. Roy's face. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to turn around and hold his son. The voice was so real, so full of agony. But the father bit his lip until it bled, kept his eyes locked straight ahead, and marched forward into the darkness. Finally, the flickering orange glow of the cremation fire broke through the tree line. Dr. Roy stumbled into the shmashan, fell to his knees, and hurled the bloody branch directly into the ritual flames. The fire violently erupted, shooting 20 feet into the air. A horrible, shrill shriek echoed through the trees, slowly fading away into the wind. Almost immediately, the heavy, oppressive atmosphere broke. By the firelight, Dr. Roy watched in absolute shock as color visibly rushed back into Rohan's pale cheeks. The boy gasped, his chest heaving as he pulled in a massive breath of air. He opened his eyes, looking around in utter confusion. He was alive. The curse was broken. Later that night, as they sat in the safety of their home, the tantric looked at Rohan. "The ritual is complete," the mystic said, "but spirits like her do not attach themselves to a person for no reason. Tell them how you invited her in."
Rohan, looking down at his hands in shame, finally confessed the dark secret he had been hiding for months. He explained that one night he had helped a couple from two violently opposed families elope. He gave them money, helped them organize a secret wedding deep in the woods, and sent them off. But after the couple left, Rohan's friends refused to walk him back, terrified of the dark. So, Rohan had to walk home alone through the jungle. As he was walking, he passed a massive peepal tree. He glanced up, and sitting on one of the branches was a woman. Her hair was wild, her eyes glowed a faint, unnatural red, and she was slowly swinging her legs back and forth. Rohan was terrified. He put his head down and tried to walk faster, pretending he hadn't seen her. But she knew. As he hurried down the dirt path, he suddenly heard a voice call out from the darkness behind him. "Rohan, what are you doing out here so late?" It was his father's voice. A wave of massive relief washed over the teenage boy. He wasn't alone. His dad had come looking for him. Smiling, Rohan stopped in his tracks and turned around. But there was no one there. The path was completely empty. It was a trick. And in the dark, ancient folklore of the region, if a spirit calls out to you in the night and you turn around to acknowledge them, you are giving them permission to follow you home. She had latched onto his soul the exact second he looked back. He had kept the entire ordeal a secret, knowing that if he admitted to helping the couple elope, it would cause riots in the village and ruin his parents' pristine reputation. His pride and fear had nearly cost him his life. Following the horrific ordeal, Rohan completely changed. He stopped sneaking out. He cut ties with his superficial friends. He stopped spending his parents' money on pointless thrills, dedicating his life to quiet spirituality and immense gratitude for the father who walked through the valley of the shadow of death and refused to look back.